Okay, so we want to cover a lot. We were just at the climax of the story. I mean, there's a couple, but you said when she tells Ahashverosh that it's Haman. Ahashverosh is not impressed with Haman at this point. Um, yeah. Um, okay, I want to go back a little bit to chapter five. Chapter five, I think it's chapter five. Um, no, chapter six. I want to go back to chapter six a little bit in terms of Haman's place in Achashverosh's eyes. I think it's been compromised by what happened in chapter six. So at that point, his position is already teetering, I think. Right. That's the purpose of chapter six, where things are, there's mini story when Achashverosh wants to honor the person who saved him, and Haman thinks it's him, and he takes Mordechai around. So all of that brought about a certain chilling, I think, of Achashverosh's view of Haman. So he's already not thrilled with him. Chazal say that he's invited to the parties twice, and even the language that Esther uses is meant to create jealousy on Achashverosh's part towards Haman, and possibly to think that he's planning uh, to what do you call it? To unseat him, to replace him. Okay, so let's begin. So the actual psukim, so we're in pasuk Zayin, in Perek Zayin, Zayin. והמלך קם בחמתו ממשתה היין אל גינת הביתן, והמן עומד לבקש על נפשו מאסתר המלכה, כי ראה כי כלתה אליו הרעה מת המלך. So the king got up in his anger from the wine party to the palace garden, and Haman stood up to seek his life from Esther the queen, because he saw that the evil or the bad had finished towards him from the king. Right? The king hadn't decreed yet what was going to happen to Haman, but clearly it wasn't going to be good. So he tries to win over, at least plead to Esther, right, that maybe she'll have a soft spot for him, to forgive him and to influence the king, at least not to kill him. I want to point out something I noticed. I looked up earlier this week that the expression mishte yain only appears in this chapter. It appears three times, right? And only in all of Tanakh. All of Tanakh, you have a lot of times it says mishte, but here it says mishte yain, right? And I think that's significant. I think that wine has played a significant role in the connection between Haman and Achashverosh at this point. And Esther is sort of barging in on that relationship and creating a Mishta Yain to include her as well, right? That she's going to be part of this connection with the king, and eventually to bump Haman out of that connection. Okay, Pasuk Chet. והמלך שב מגינת הביתן לבית משתה יין, והמן נופל על מיטה אשר אסתר עליה, ויאמר המלך הגם לכבוש את מלכה אמי בבית, הדבר יצא מפי המלך ופני המן הפו. Okay, so here also, by the way, right, so we see the next verse, again, Mishta Yain, which clearly is, in my mind, meant to emphasize, right? We know what type of Mishta it was, what type of feast it was, right? Rashi pointed out earlier that mishte is because the drink is what's the central part of the feast or the banquet, right? but includes both. But here the focus seems to be on the wine very specifically. In any case, the translation is the king came back from the palace garden to the house of the wine party, and Haman had fallen on the bed that Esther was upon. Esther was upon, yeah. Remember that they drank like we do on Pesach, that they ate and drank on beds, and that was the normal way. What do you call it? Aristocrats, wealthy people ate and drank, right? And they were semi-reclined on couches that were low to the ground. Okay, and the king said, "Is it also to conquer the queen with me at home, right? Meaning, are you doing this as well?" So the word went out of the mouth of the king, and the face of Haman literally means was covered, right? Was covered over. Uh, okay, so there's a lot going on in this verse. So first of all, there's a funny grammatical tense in one of the verbs. Anybody catch it? I tried to hide it in my translation, but if one wants to read it literally, there's a verb that's not the way we'd expect it to be. What's that verb?
Nofel in present
Nofel.
tense?
Good. Yeah, nofel. Good, exactly. So that, Barry? No? Who was it?
Katya. Katya.
Katya. Okay, excellent. Uh, Um, so yeah, so Nofel is present, right? So I think the on the Peshat level, it means that when the king came in, that's when he was falling. I think that's what it means on Peshat level. But Rashi learned something else over here, and he says, if you look at Rashi, very short Rashi, Hamalach dachafo, that an angel pushed him. Right. This is very similar, by the way, to Rashi about Yehuda and Tamar, that Yehuda was pushed into Tamar by an angel. Right. Same basic idea that there's Hashgachat Hashem, that there's divine providence pushing characters, whether it's literal or not. There's pushing from the outside going on, and here, for obvious reasons, again, I think one of the things to understand about the king's hesitation is Haman was his big buddy, right? And as I pointed out that in Perek Vav, there's a distancing, but that's a relative term, right? Haman is his man. He's the main guy, right? Um, Achashverosh has two loves. One is Esther and one is Haman. And so far he's kept them apart, right? One in each realm. Okay. And so to turn on a dime and just say off with his head is not such an obvious thing. So there needs to be a lot of other smaller things, as is the nature of this book, all sorts of small details that fill in the things that need to happen in order for everything to work, right? So this nofel, whatever it signifies, there's clearly the timing as Achashverosh is coming in, that's when Haman is nofel, right? Which makes it worse, right? If he's already there, first of all, if he was already nofel, it would be clear what he was doing. I mean, clearly what he's doing is to beseech her. If you look, one of the Mefarshim, I think, spells it out. The Evan Ezra, V'haman nofel, Shem mitchanen u'mishtachave l'raglea. He was bowing down to her feet, right, to plead with her. That's what you do when someone has power over you, right? And you're trying to get on their good side. So you humble yourself as much as possible. What do? You fall on your face. Okay. So that had he just been in a position where it was clear what he was doing, then it wouldn't have been so difficult. But for whatever reason, he seemed to have fallen exactly at that point. So Ibn Ezra explains what he thinks. Continuing the Ibn Ezra, Kara'u, Kishava Melech, and when he saw that, when Haman saw that the king had returned, Nafal Mirov Pachdo, that he fell out of fear, right? So, and it's very interesting. Then the Ibn Ezra says, "Derech drash yadua." He says, and we all know the drash, referring back to what Rashi said. But the bottom line is very similar, right? That the circumstances were such to incriminate Haman, and the reason he was in a position where he was vulnerable in terms of how he was standing, that he was leaning, inclining, bowing down, whatever it is, was out of fear and out of making a petition to Esther. Okay, so then it says lichvosh et hamalka imi, right? To conquer the queen with me. So how do we understand that? What's the simplest way to understand that?
To seduce her away from me.
Yeah, which would seem to be obviously. I mean, the chutzpah involved is like crazy, right? To take to at that time, unless right, there's still some sort of relationship between Esther and Haman. Remember, that's what Achashverosh was thinking before, right? He hasn't had a lot of time to think about this, right? A lot of times you're still stuck in your old thought pattern. So, he doesn't know what to think. But whatever it is, it's totally outrageous, right? But what's interesting is he doesn't say this point off with his head, right? He just makes this accusation at Haman, and something happens to Haman's face, right? Incidentally, before we go to what happens to Haman's face, the Gra learns that lichvosh means to kill. Are you trying to kill the queen, right? Which, in terms of where Haman is standing right now, makes a little more sense than to seduce her, because obviously she's not really interested in Haman. And he's going to die anyway, so she's the cause. He's angry at her, right? So, but again, that's all in Achashverosh's mind, because we see that what he's trying to do is to petition for his life. In any case, Pnei Haman Hafu, so says the Ibn Ezra further on this, that what we're talking about is, one second, yeah, what we're talking about is that anybody who was in disgrace of the king, who the king was angry at, had to cover their face. It says the Ibn Ezra, this is well known in the books of Paras, in the history books of the Persian Empire. I'll take his word for it. But the idea is that the king shouldn't see that person's face, right? So their face is covered. So he's like persona non grata. But again, he's not, the king is still mulling over what to do with him. And that's where we have the next verse coming in. And remember that this is all coming out of not just Perek Vav, but also Perek Hey, where Haman decides to take action against Mordechai by building this massive pole, right? That apparently you could see from the palace courtyard, right? The fact that it could be seen from the palace courtyard was very advantageous right now. So let's take a look at the next verse. ויום ההרבונה אחד מן הסייסים לפני המלך, גם הנה העץ אשר עשה המן למרדכי, אשר דיבר טוב על המלך, עומד בבית המן, גבוה 50 אמה, ויאמר המלך תלאוהו עליו. Okay, so it's only at this point It's only this like the straw that breaks the camel's back is harvona, right? So much so that I don't know if it's I assume it's a midrash. I didn't see it inside, but someone I heard a report saying that harvona wasn't really harvona, it was really Eliyahu dressed as harvona, right? In other words, again, literally or not, there's divine intervention exactly at this point when the advisors comes out of nowhere to point this out. All the advisors had been Haman's friends, right? So Arvana says, when the servants said in front of the king, behold, also is the pole that Haman had made for Mordechai, who spoke well about the king. Standing in the house of Haman is 50 amot tall, and the king said, hang him upon it. Okay, that's when it was decided. So the fact that, if you remember, one of the Mefarshim told him, said that his wife and his advisor told him to chop up the pole, right? But he was rushed. He didn't have time. I think the Gra said that. The Gra said that he was rushed out. He didn't have time. And this was literally the straw that broke the camel's back. Uh, had Charbonat not been able to say Hine, he's pointing to it. There's the pole, right? So question is, what's with this pole? Why was that such a big thing for Achashverosh, right? Haman wants to kill Esther's people. He wants to lichvosh her in the house, whatever lichvosh means. It's certainly pretty bad, either way you go, right? And now he says, but he also has this poll for Mordechai. Yes, so what? Why is that? Why is that the clincher? So Rashi just takes the simple thing that it's cumulative, right? It's not that it's so great, but it's if you've ever been in a situation where you're angry and one small thing, like you're controlling your anger, right? And then someone just says a wrong word and you blow up at them. Not none of you, but some people. That's what it is. That's what Rashi says. Take a look at Rashi. Gam hina eitz, gam racheret asa. He also did another evil thing. Shechina eitz litlot ahavo shel melech shetzil melech misama mavet. Right. He wanted to hang he also wanted to hang the friend of the king that saved the king from the poison potion, right? The death potion. Now, you could read into Rashi something else here, right? Why might this anger uh, Achashverosh in particular? Any thoughts? Why would this be so bad? No one knows? Um,
Does it seem like maybe Haman is like um like he's doing a lot of not like bad things, but like okay, first you're doing something towards the queen that's like not under my command, and now you're also doing this other thing towards Mordecai that's like not really under my command either. It's like through your own fruit, like need and want, basically.
okay, that definitely shows the sort of independent decision making, which with pretty serious implications. But if you focus on the last part of what Rashi said, right? Litlot ovo shel hamelech shetzil hamelech misam hamavet. So question is, why did, in Achashverosh's eyes, why did Haman hate Mordechai? So we all think because he's a Jew. There's a lot of Jews running around. Why does he hate Mordechai? What's special about Mordechai in the king's eyes?
Could it be that he's like, it seems like he's trying to depose the king because he, like, first Esther, who's the queen, so he's like trying to undermine the king, and then also now Mordecai, who saved his life, so now it looks really bad on him, and like he's trying to do a coup or something.
Right, right. So, and the Alshich says as much that the reason, right, the implication, this is going further than what's explicit in Rashi, although it could be what this Rashi had in mind, but the Alshich says that Harvona was saying, um, eh, you know, who's Mordechai? The one who spoke well about the king. Why was he killing him? Because he spoke well about the king. That's why Haman hated Mordechai, right? So it's hatred not towards Mordechai, it's hatred towards Achashverosh. The Gra goes further than that and says, if you look at the funny language, the way Harbona presents it, right? Look carefully. It says, Gam hinei ha'etz asher asa Haman lemordechai asher diber, right? So we would continue it, right? But what if you put a comma there, right? Achashverosh is pretty livid, so he's not listening so straight, and doesn't know, the cancellation marks. But asher Haman lemordechai asher diber tov al hamelech. What's tov al hamelech? The eights. The eights, the poll is even better for the king than it is more for Mordechai. The Gra says that it could be read that way, and could be the way Achashverosh would hear it. Again, subliminally, maybe. But the fact that it's presented this way, again, it's the Shemaim orchestrating things, right? Whether it's Eliyahu, which probably we would not want to take literally, right? The idea is still that this final straw that needed to come was presented in the way that Achashverosh can see it in the worst possible way. That this Haman is, out to get anybody who's your friend. Okay, so I think we said everything we want to say about this. Okay, so they hung Haman on the pole that he had prepared for Mordechai, and the anger of the king subsided. We saw this earlier, right, with Vashti, also at the end of everything, and said that his anger had subsided, right? So that's what Achashverosh seems to have a pattern of having close relations that get him terribly upset, that he gets rid of, and then his anger subsides. Next perek, B'yom hahu natan hamelech Achashverosh laEsther hamalka et beit Haman tzor haYehudim uMordechai ba lifnei hamelech ki higida Esther ma'hula. So on that day, right, the day this wine party had occurred, and that he hung Haman, on that day the king Achashverosh gave to Esther the queen the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordechai came in front of the king, right, to also become a special minister, as we'll see in the next verse, because Esther had told him, meaning told the king, it doesn't say Esther had said meaning what Mordechai is to her, right? So what does that mean exactly? Not clear. Rashi says, Echu karovla, right? That seems to be the one thing that wasn't known, according to the Gra, probably according to Rashi, like we said last week, right? They knew that she came from his house. They knew that he adopted her. At this point, they knew that they were both Jewish, but they didn't necessarily know they were related, right? Even though we saw before that Rashi had said that Achashverosh understood that she was from royalty. So I'm not sure what to do with that, because according to that, it doesn't seem that there's anything new to learn unless we say that she just, when she revealed to him that she was Jewish, she just said, oh, and by the way, I'm descended from the royal house. Maybe. Anyway, the bottom line is that there's some level of relationship that was revealed here that brought Mordechai into the palace. Pasuk Bet Yasar Melech et Tavato Asher Hevir Me'aman V'itna Mordechai V'tasem Esther Mordechai al Beit Haman. So the king removed his ring that he had taken off from Haman, presumably before he hung him, and he gave it to Mordechai. And Esther placed Mordechai over the house of Haman as an administrator, presumably. Okay. One of the Mefarshim points out there's no time in between. It goes, Haman is the prime minister in the morning, and Mordechai becomes the prime minister in the afternoon or evening, right? So there's a dramatic switch. We mentioned before, right, when it says that the party, Achashverosh's party, was to do karatzon ish ve'ish, to do like the will of every person, that Chazal have a midrash that he was willing to do the will of Haman one day, and he was willing to do the will of Mordechai the next. But in fact, it's not even one day the next. It's actually the same day, right? So, which shows that Achashverosh is not interested in policy, right? He doesn't have an ideology of how the country should be run. It's simply what's good for him, who's loyal to him, and who's going to do the best job in making him wealthy, keeping him comfortable. Okay, so Pasuk Gimel, Tosef Esther, ותדבר לפני המלך ותיפול לפני רגליו ותתחנן לו להעביר את רעת המן הגגי ואת מחשבתו אשר השב אל היהודים. So from this verse we can see what Haman was trying to do towards Esther, right? In the previous chapter we saw a few minutes ago, right? You'll notice, by the way, I'll translate it immediately, but you'll notice that this stand in front of Achashverosh seems to be much more precarious than the first one, right? When she risked her life to have an audience with him, right? She, she didn't do all this fancy crying and pleading, right? It seems, as we'll see, that the problem is that there's a decree out, and the Persian practice is never to reverse a law, right? Even a king can't reverse a law. So she doesn't know how else to save the Jews. I mean, he hasn't saved the Jews yet. He's killed Haman, right? And he's not pleased. He's very displeased, let's say, right? He ran out into the garden angrily when he heard that there's this decree that's going to kill Esther. So he's really not happy with that. But as far as doing anything about it, besides killing Haman, and that was, ultimately not clear he would do if it wasn't for Harvona, he hasn't done anything about the decree. And part of the reason he hasn't done anything about the decree is because you don't do that in Persia, right? And he would belittle himself as the king, and that's critical. That's really the issue. I don't think he's concerned about the holiness of the law, right? That's unconstitutional, but he doesn't want to look silly that he made this law and now he's retracting it. So in any case, to translate the verse, and Esther continued, right? Meaning continued to plead, and said in front of the king, and fell in front of his feet and cried and beseeched him to remove the evil, meaning the evil decree of Haman the Agagi, and his thought that he thought about the Jews. So here too, you see, like in that other stand, that there's a need for him to forward his scepter before her, right? In other words, what she's doing is inappropriate unless he graces her. Seems like she's putting her life on the line now as well by asking him to go against the law. In any case, the king hands out his scepter, this golden scepter, and Esther got up and she stood in front of the king. ותאמר אם על המלך טוב, אם מצאתי חן לפניו, וכאשר דבר לפני המלך, וטובני בעיניו, ייכתב להשיב את הספרים, מחשבת המן בן המעתה, הגי אשר כתב לעבד יהודים אשר בכל מדינות המלך. Right? So again, the wordiness of this and what she has to say, right? He's already indicated favor towards her. And yet, right, Esther said to the king, she said, if it's good for the king, and if I found favor before him, and the thing is proper in front of the king, and I'm good in his eyes, it should be written to retrieve the books of the thought of Haman ben Hammedatha, the Agagi, that he wrote to destroy the Jews in all of the provinces of the king, right? So why? And she continues, right? Ki echecha ochal v'raiti b'ra'a asher yimtza et ami, v'cha ochal v'raiti b'avdan muladati. Because how can I continue and see the evil that is will find my people, will happen to my people, and how will I be able to see the destruction of my heritage, right? So a lot, there's a very long speech, very pleading sort of speech, because again, from the speech, it's clear just how much he's asking for. And therefore his reluctance, as we're going to see in the next verse, the next two verses. Pasuk Zayin, v'yomer HaMelech Achashverosh le'Esther HaMalka u'Mordechai Yehudi, hinei beit Haman natati le'Esther, ve'oto talu al ha'etz, al asher shalach yado b'Yehudim. So the king Achashverosh said to Esther the queen and to Mordechai the Jew, or the Judean, behold, I've given the house of Haman to Esther, and I've hung him on the tree because he sent his hand against the Jews. Vatem kitvo Yehudim ketov beinechem b'shem melech v'chatmu b'tavat hamelech kiktav asher niktav b'shem melech v'nachtom b'tavat hamelech ein lahashiv. So when you can write about the Jews according to what's good in your eyes, in the name of the king, and seal it with the ring of the king, because the writing of the king that is written in his name, in the king's name, and sealed with the seal of the king cannot be retrieved. Okay, so first of all, let me ask you, why does the action, the response of Achashverosh is in Pasuk Chet, write a new decree based on what you want, right? But why does we know why Esther is flowing with all sorts of language, because she's asked, her ask is tremendously big. But why does Achashverosh say, he's done all these good things in Pasuk Zayin? What's his point there?
He's basically saying like, haven't I done enough for you?
maybe, which would establish him as right. There's a machloket in the Gemara whether he's a clever king or a stupid king. That would sort of push in one direction as opposed to the other. Getting, like I've done, I'm gonna get, I can't stop, killing the Jews. That's ridiculous. Even though it's clear that he doesn't care. But the law is the law. So that could be. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi, I think, is dealing with this question on Zion. He says, kol ro'im shani chafetz bachem. Therefore, since I've done all these things, everybody sees that I desire you, I like you, meaning plural, you and Mordechai. V'kol ma shtomru yaminu. Hakol sheme'itihu. And whatever you'll say, everybody will believe that it's from me. Lefichach, and this is the key, ein tzrichim atem lahashivam. Therefore, you don't need to retrieve them. Rather, write new decrees according to what's good in your eyes. In other words, you can have contradictory laws. When there's contradictory laws, people are going to have to decide, what does the king really want, right? How are they going to know what he really wants? Who does he like, right? We know Haman has one law, that's the old prime minister's law, and the new prime minister's law, Achashverosh, right, has a new law. It's not that they rescinded the previous law, just two contradictory laws. So people need to know, which one should we do? So it says more, Achashverosh, you don't need to. Don't worry about it. Don't take things so seriously, right? There's ways around. There's ways around it. You don't have to, um, do anything wild. Write new things, right? And continues Rashi, Ein lahashiv, right? And this is different than what many of the other Mefarshim say. Eina ein lahashivo, lasuk ktav hamelech beziyuf. Says Rashi, it's not that it's a rule in Persia, but it's not nice, it's not beautiful, it's not proper. Pasnifsht in Yiddish, right? It's just not it's inappropriate because it makes the king look foolish, right? It looks as if it's a forgery. That's what Rashi says. Both the Gra and the well, actually, not the Gra. The Eben Ezra and the Al say very interesting things here. The Eben Ezra asks an interesting question, which I feel bad that I never asked the question. He asked, why did Haman, why did Mordechai and Esther decree that the Jews should kill their enemies, as opposed to just saving the Jews, right? Is it about revenge? Right now, no one's done anything, right? So if you'll tell me, well, what can you tell me? There's an answer I'm waiting for, which I already have an answer for. Go ahead.
I don't think this is the answer that you're waiting for,
Okay.
but
Even better.
I had a directly related thought when Haman was pleading for his life and Queen Esther she could have had like mercy on him in that moment. And it reminds me that on Purim we read the Haftorah with Shmuel
Right.
and Shaul HaMelech. And so it's like I thought it was very interesting. I'm like, so here they're telling us again, kill your enemies. Like don't have mercy. In Parshas Zachor, it's like the same theme.
Right. So that's sort of what I wanted you to say, but I wanted you to push it a little further. It's not just enemies. Who's Haman? And why is it related to that Haftarah?
Amalek.
Yeah. Okay. What do you do with Amalek? You kill them, right? That's good for Haman. Are all the enemies of the Jews in Persia Amalek? Presumably not. I don't know if I don't know if any of them are. Right. I think the Eben Ezra it's actually very nice because it's what we call the shitato. Anybody know what that expression means? The shitato, according to his approach. It's an exercise we do in yeshivot. Also, is trying to figure out something according to their position. Now, the Eben Ezra points out that I forget where, somewhere in Breshit, I don't remember where. I can look it up if anybody's interested. That the Christians today are not from Esav, and the Muslims are not from Ishmael, right? Why does he say that? What's his proof? Anybody know? Why? What would you say that? Because what happened at the time of Sancheriv mixed up all the nations, right? So we don't know who's descended from those original nations. Also, what we don't know, who's descended from Amalek, right? So it could be Haman had a personal tradition, but by and large, we don't know. So for the Eben Ezra, right, there's no way of deciding anybody in the Persian Empire. The story takes place after the Syrian Empire of Sancheriv, right? So we don't know who people are, right? And right now they haven't done anything, right? So the Ibn Ezra, based on those premises, says, it's one thing. I mean, he doesn't say it's one thing Haman, but okay, I think we're not shedding tears about Haman. But the Ibn Ezra says, what about all these other people? Why should Mordechai have them killed? What they're really after is saving the Jews. There was a decree against the Jews, right? There's only one person behind the decree, as far as we know, right? So why kill all these potential enemies? I mean, obviously they're bad people, but that's what Ibn Ezra asks. So what's his answer? His answer is there was no other way out. His answer was that you have a problem, and it was Achashverosh, according to Rashi, is suggesting something that's not as simple as he makes out, right? Since the king likes Mordechai, so we'll take Mordechai's law as opposed to Haman's law. They're both in the books. If I have a Jew that I don't like, right, I can plead, listen, I was only following Haman's law. It's also sealed according to the king, right? So the Ibn Ezra says that I'm not going to read it inside; it's too long. You should take a look at it afterwards. It says that Mordechai was a Chacham Gadol, was a very wise person, because this is a perfect way of explaining away Haman's decree, right? Because what did Haman say? There's some good guys and bad guys, and the good guys should kill the bad guys, right? And he said who the good guys were. The good guys are the ones who will kill anybody who's going to kill the Jews, and the bad guys are the Jews. So now, says the Ibn Ezra, what's Mordechai going to say? Haman gave the law from the king, except he took an eraser and switched things, right? Instead of everybody killing the Jews, it's the Jews killing everybody, meaning killing everybody who is against them. That's what Ibn Ezra says is going on. The Alshich is something even more precise in the decree. He says not even a question of erasing, right? It's a question of you can't change what the king said, but you can interpret it. That's what the Alshich says. I mean, it's such a Jewish thing to say, right? That if you teach the decree of Haman, right? So you can read it two different ways, right? He says, right? It said, 1 second. I'm in the wrong place. No wonder I can't find it. He says, yeah, it said in the original decree, "Lashmid laharog et kol haYehudim," right? So he says it doesn't say who's supposed to kill. The subject is missing. So it could be that the kol is the subject. Everybody could come to kill the Yehudim, or the kol is the object. And who's going to kill the kol? The Yehudim, right? In other words, it's simply a question of interpretation. Who's going to interpret it at this point? Well, Mordechai and Esther, right? That's the power that's been given to them, according to Achashverosh, right? So it's interesting that the Mordechai and Esther are placed into a very tricky situation where on the one hand, they're given the power to reverse things, but they're given very strict parameters within which they can do it. There's only so much they can do, and they have to use their wisdom, at least according to these Mefarshim. According to Rashi, they don't even have to do that. As soon as everybody sees who the king's side is on, that should be good enough. Okay. Let's see there. All right. Let's go on. ויקחו ספרי המלך בעת ההיא בחודש השלישי וחודש סיוון ב23 בו ויכתב כל אשר ציווה מרדכי אל היהודים והאחשתרפנים והפחות ושרי המדינות אשר מהודו ועד כוש אשר 20 מדינה ככתבה ועם ולעם כלשונו והיהודים כתבם כלשונם. So this sort of echoes the first sending out. And again, this formality that we see that has to be done a certain way, right? Regardless of the content. Content doesn't matter. The process is what's more important. We've just seen that, right? You can't retrieve laws. You can work around laws, but it has to be done according to how things work in Paras. Okay, so to translate that, they read the books of the king, meaning that these new books that Mordechai and Esther wrote at that time in the third month, right? So time had passed, which was the month of Sivan. I want you to remind you to notice that there's a translation for the Persian Jews who are more comfortable with the word Sivan than they are with Chodesh HaShlishi, which is the way the Torah refers to Sivan. Unless we look down upon them, we have to remember that we're also more comfortable with Sivan than Chodesh HaShlishi. Like Chodesh HaShlishi, you have to make cheshbon. What's Chodesh Rishon? That's Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. Oh, Chodesh HaShlishi. But if you say Sivan, you know what it's talking about. So Nebuch, that is... I once wrote that going back to the Jewish calendar, the Tanakh calendar is a siman of Geulah, and we're not there yet, but that I think is something that has to happen. In any case, that is the month of Sivan on the 23rd day in it, and it was written according to everything that Mordechai wrote about the Jews. You'll notice it's Mordechai here by himself, not Esther. And to the governors and the lieutenants and the ministers of the provinces that were from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, right? We saw that before. Right. Again, emphasizing that it's going to every single province, all 127. Every province like its script, and every nation like its language. Right. So the right different nations might share script, as we have in today. All sorts of nations share Latin script, right? German, French, English, whatever, right? And other nations share other scripts. Right? I think the Persians use Arabic script as well. In any case, and each, as we said, and to the Jews, to the Judeans, according to their script and according to their language. טוב, ויכתוב, פסוק י' ויכתוב בשם המלך אחשוורוש ויחתום בתאוות המלך וישלח ספרים ביד הרצים בסוסים רוכבי הרכש האשתרנים בני הרמחים. So it was written in the name of the king, Chashverosh, and sealed with the seal of the king, was sent, and these books were sent in the hands of the runners on the horses and the special camel riders, were Bnei Ramachim. Right? Apparently they had express roads and express riders that was very fast to get things around. י' א' אשר נתן המלך יהודים אשר בכל עיר ועיר לקהב לעמוד על נפשם להשמיד להרוג לאבד את כל אל עם ומדינה הצרים אותם טף ונשים שלום לבוז. So what's interesting, by the way, I'm just noticing it for the first time, maybe someone has insight into it, is the content of the books only is revealed now, right? We've been speaking about the books, right, and how they were sent away, but we didn't even know what was sent to them, right? So now we see what's sent in them, which the king gave to the Jews in every city to congregate and to stand up for their lives, to destroy and to kill and to get rid of all of the soldiers, militias, I guess would be a better way to say, all the militias of people and provinces that were opposed to them, child and women, right? In other words, they kill all these families together, and their property was to be for booty. Now, it's very interesting that last part, as Shalom Avos, because in the end, they're not going to take the property, right? And yet Mordechai seems to be writing this. So I have two questions on this verse. Number one, why did it take so long to tell us what was in it? And number two, why did Mordechai say they could take the booty, the property? Anybody have any thoughts? I mean, I think in terms of the first question, I think we've already seen that the content seems to be secondary. That's certainly what Rashi said, right? That which is what Rashi, speaking in the name of Achashverosh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you write now, as long as people see I'm on your side. That's what's going to make the difference, right? So it could be that's what's going on, but I don't know why he says Shalom Vos. Don't know. Okay. Anyway, and by the way, it's especially a good indication that they view their enemies not as Amalek, right? If Mordechai can say Shalom Lavos, right? So you're not supposed to take property from Amalek, right? That was the other thing that got Shaul in trouble. Shaul got in trouble because he spared the king, but he also spared the tzon, the what do you call it, the sheep and cattle of Amalek that people wanted, partly to sacrifice, but mostly to eat. Okay, pasuk Yud Bet, biyom echad bechol medinot hamel Chashverosh b'shosha asar lachodesh shneim asar chodesh Adar. So this would be on the same day that was supposed to be the massacre of the Jews on one day, right? In other words, they would only have one day to do this. It wouldn't be a free for all that they could do for as long as they wanted to. On one day in all the provinces of the king Achashverosh, on the 13th day of the 12th month, again, that is the month of Adar, right? For those of you who don't remember what the 12th month is, it's Chodesh Adar, right? I'll point to this again and again. You'll see that there'll be a change towards the end. So I want you to notice that. Yud Gimel, Patshegen Haktav Linaten Dat Bechol Medina Medina Galoi Lechol Hamim Uliyot V'Liyot HaYudim Atidim Liyom Hazeh Linakem Oivehem. So Patshegen Haktav is a formal decree, a written decree to give the law in all of the provinces that should be revealed to all the peoples, that the Jews should get ready for this day to take vengeance from their enemies. So it's actually a Rashi that we skipped that I wanted to see. Right here also, we asked before, what was the, 1 second. right? There is a oh, we didn't get to it yet. Never mind. It's coming up. Yeah, okay, so next verse, and that's Rashi in the next verse, Yudalid. רצים רוכבי הרכש, השטרנים יצאו מבוהלים ודחופים בדבר המלך והדת נינה בשושן הבירה. So the runners and the camel riders went out quickly and rushed by the word of the king, and the law was given in Shushan, the capital fortress. Okay, so just in terms of the hurry, right? What was the hurry? When is this supposed to happen? We're in Sivan, right? And this is supposed to happen in Adar, right? As we said, the third month versus the 12th month. So 12 minus 3, right? 9 months away. So what's the rush? That's what Rashi wants to know. What's Rashi's answer? So he says, take a look at Rashi. מפועלים ממהרים אותם לעשות מהרה לפי שלא היה להם פנאי, שאין להם להקדים רצים הראשונים להעבירם. So it says Rashi, at the very end is the point I want you to notice, that they're supposed to run past the other runners, right? So that their law gets there first, right? In fact, the runners were probably quicker than that. It's not, I mean, normal travel would take 3-4 months to get different parts of the empire, but the runners were known to be very swift. So I'm not sure if we can uphold Rashi in terms of what we know, but it's a good answer, because otherwise we want to know what's the rush. But we can give the same answer we gave before from the Alshich, is that Jews are suffering, right? So even though Achashverosh may not be in a hurry, Mordechai has to get this done as quickly as possible, because the Jews are suffering. They're under the impression still that there's a decree out against their lives. Okay, we have 1 more minute. Any questions, comments? Barry, go ahead.
So is Rashi saying that the first message wasn't completely dispersed yet? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, that's what Rashi is saying.
How could that be? Because everyone was mourning and they all fasted, so they obviously knew.
Well, where were they fasting? It's
Only in Shushan?
yeah, I think that's what it says. Shushan Navochas, that was the first thing. Let's see. When Esther says that everybody should, here, Perek Daled Pasuk Ted Zayin Lechnos et Kol HaYudim Nimsaim B'Shushan with Samuel. Okay, so one second. Before that, maybe. Who was mourning? Let's see. That's the beginning. It must be. Yeah. So you're right. If you look at the beginning of Perek Daled at Pasuk Gimel. Yeah, so yeah, I mean it's a good question on Rashi, because Rashi had that pasuk. He says that the Jew, every place where the word of the king reaches, there was mourning for the Jews. So it sounds like it got everywhere, right, already. What Rashi might say is, well, first of all, there might be two levels of decrees. That's one thing Rashi might say. The other thing is, it says the word datum magia, where it reaches. So I think the simple reading is it reaches everywhere where he's reigning. But Rashi might tell you, no, there are places that are further afield. Maybe. I think that's possible to learn Rashi that way. Any other questions? No. Okay, so we have 2 more weeks after this, Bezrat Hashem, and we'll make a siyum. Okay,
Hooray.
looking forward to seeing you next week.
Thank
Thank
Okay,
you.
and daylight saving times does summer. We don't change the clocks in Israel until the end of March, after the end of this thing. So this is going to be the time for the rest of the course. Okay. Take care, Shavuot Tov. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank
you,
you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Pleasure. Pleasure. Bye-bye.